some point in the life of every founder, the question subtly changes. It's no longer just about how do I grow this company? It becomes something much bigger. What happens when I'm no longer the one running it? Right now, millions of founder-led businesses are approaching that moment. Over the next decade, a historic wave of succession, owner transition, and business exits will reshape the entrepreneurial landscape. But for founders, this isn't just about selling a company for the right number. It also includes identity, legacy, leadership, and what comes next. I'm Paden Hughes, and this is The Founder's Second Act, a podcast exploring succession planning, founder exits, leadership transition, and the deeply human side of building and eventually stepping away from the company you created. Because the business may have been your life's work, but it was never meant to be your entire life. Thank you for tuning into this podcast, and I hope you enjoy today's conversation. All right, let's get straight to the point here. If you are a founder and you have found this podcast, I want you to imagine something uncomfortable for a moment. Let's just start with that. I want you to imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up and you just decide not to go to the office. Not because you're sick, not because you're on vacation, not because you're burned out, just because you want to see what will happen. Picture that. Would your company keep running? Would your leadership team know how to make decisions? Would customers still get served at the level of standards you've considered normal? Or would everything slowly stall until you walked back through the door? The truth is that most founders never test that question. And yet, over the next decade, millions of founders are going to face that moment whether they're prepared for it or not. Because where we are in the landscape of business is we are entering the largest business ownership transition in modern history. That's what's real. And most companies are not ready for it. So the economic moment that we're in, let's talk about that. In the United States today, more than 50% of privately held businesses are owned by baby boomers. These founders built their companies over the last 30 to 40 years. They built them before entrepreneurship was trendy, before social media, before venture capital became mainstream. And they built them the hard way, through long hours, no vacations, through reinvesting profits, missing their kids' events at school or their sports competitions, through learning things on the fly before the internet allowed you to become an expert. And many of these businesses today are incredibly valuable, not just financially, but economically. Within their communities, they provide valued head of household jobs. They write big checks to support local charities and keep the money in the communities circulating. Small business has been the backbone of American entrepreneurship for decades. But here's the statistic that should make every founder pause. While the majority of these owners say they intend to exit their business within the next 5 to 10 years, fewer than 1/3 of them actually have a strategic succession plan. And I'm willing to bet more than 75% of them all had business plans before they started their companies, but they have not created a plan for how to exit and wind down their companies. So think about that. That's millions of companies approaching transition, and most of them have not actually engineered how that transition is going to happen. Not operationally, not financially, not psychologically, which means something surprising is about to happen. We have a huge number of founders that are going to reach retirement age and discover their business cannot function at the same level without them. So why does this podcast exist? My name is Paden Hughes, and over the last 15 years, I've worked with founders in many different stages of transition. Some are 5 years away from selling. Others are quietly exploring succession for the first time. Some are mentoring leadership teams with the intention for them to eventually take over. And some are forced into conversations far earlier than expected because life happens, health happens, a crisis out of nowhere, a diagnosis, burnout happens, losing your passion. It fired you up for 2 or 3 decades, and you finally have the courage to admit it has lost its luster for you. It's not the same level of excitement that it used to bring. And that last category is where my own story begins. A few years ago, I was running 2 companies and I had 2 children under the age of 4. And like many founders, or co-founders, my life had slowly evolved into something where the business depended heavily on me. Strategic decisions flowed through me, leadership conversations flowed through me, energy flowed through me. And when founders operate like that for long enough, something subtle happens. The business starts to mirror the founder's capacity. If the founder has energy and excitement, the business moves forward. And if the founder is exhausted and depleted or out for a period of time, as I experienced through 2 maternity leaves, the company plateaus or slows. I'd never seen this more profoundly than when I had my rolling 12-month chart where I take snapshots of my company's revenue over every 12 months. So it has a rolling average and removes seasonality. So I can really see the month over month, year over year growth. And it would grow like a mountain peak, which of course every owner wants to see. But then it would plateau, baby number 1. Then it would grow, plateau, baby number 2. It really got my attention. Part of me felt proud. My fragile ego at the time really loved to see how strategic I was and effective I was as a leader, but the consultant in me realized that I was the bottleneck, and that put my company at risk. So when the pandemic hit, and in my industry, which was fitness and movement, it was labeled non-essential. Revenue dropped overnight. And at the same time, my own health began deteriorating. Subtle symptoms, seemingly unrelated, started to flare. I would treat them as isolated and random, but certainly they came in more intensity. And suddenly I found myself asking a question that many founders will avoid for as long as possible, which is, what happens if my company is no longer healthy for me? What happens if I admit that this isn't my passion? What happens if I gift myself the ability to have a second act? Founders are very good at a lot of things, and one of the things we're good is pushing through hard feelings to get things achieved. We are goal-oriented. We solve problems. We adapt. We put in the long hours. We respect ourselves for that. We require that from others. Sometimes life twists and turns and forces pivots on us to step back, whether we plan to or not, and that is exactly what happened to me. What surprised me was that I face planted on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. in my kitchen with my 2 children. Middle of the week, middle of the day, blacked out completely. Could not move my arms and legs, did not know what was happening, but knew it was a rock bottom moment that got my attention. And that really started to have me ask myself a much deeper series of questions into why this business, why this role, why does this have to be me at the helm? I think that this business that I built that I love isn't what I'm going to build next. I need to step into a season of repair and shifting. And here's what's happened is when I did that, and I wrote myself the permission slip to step back, the business did not collapse. The manager stepped forward. My co-founder stepped in, providing the vision that was needed. Systems that we had quietly been building over the years began to do their job and fill in the gaps. And I realized something really, really important. Something that changed the way I think about founder-led companies forever. And that's this. The real strength of a business is revealed when the founder is not in the room. Let me say it again because it's so important. The real strength of your business is revealed when you are no longer in the room. That realization eventually led me to the work that I do today, helping founders build companies that can outlive them and step into vibrant second acts that light their heart on fire like that company did in the first few years when you were creating it. So something that buyers understand that many founders don't is when a buyer evaluates the business, one of the first things they analyze is called founder dependency risk. In simple terms, they say, as I asked you at the beginning of the episode, if the founder disappears tomorrow, what happens? Do the customers leave? Do the employees leave? Does the revenue decline? Does a key employee drop out and create a competitor company and swoop in all of the clients? Companies that function independently of the founder command dramatically higher valuations, and that's part of why this should get your attention, because the buyer isn't purchasing a job. It's purchasing a proven system and methodology And that distinction matters a lot. The proven part is the sexy part. A transferable company is not built around a personality. It is built around an operating system. So if you have built a business around your thought leadership, your intelligence, your charisma, your local reputation, you are at risk. I know that is way more appealing and fun as a founder to have a business that works like that. And it's fun until you need to take a self-imposed sabbatical, as I did, or you need to take a 3-week vacation, or God forbid, a parent of yours is aging and really needs help. The next thing I want to talk about is the number 2 illusion. So another dynamic that I see inside founder-led companies all the time is what I call the number 2 illusion. Essentially put, almost every founder who's built a company that's doing 7, 8 figures definitely has their number 2, that trusted lieutenant, that COO, that longtime loyal operations leader, someone who's been with the company for years and they know the business, they know the clients, they know the team. And so often the founder assumes when the time comes, they'll take over. And they imagine the ride off into the sunset with the shaking of hands as the number 2 takes over and everybody just follows the number 2 and the founder gets to sort of say adios amigos and run off into the sunset. But here's what actually happens in more companies than we realize. And that's the founder finally sits down after years of assuming that's how it'll go and says, I think it's time we have a talk about you taking over. I mean, sometimes I've sat in meetings where a founder has been casually joking about them taking over, and I notice that they are contracted in their energy. They are not super lit up by it, but the founder is, so they bypass all of that and just keep talking. Oftentimes, when they sit down for the conversation and say, I think it's time we talk about you taking over, the number 2 will respond with something incredibly honest. If they're self-aware enough, and here's one small caveat, is often the number 2 wants to please the founder, wants the founder to be able to retire, cares about the employees, cares about all the stakeholders. Their heart's in their job. So they assume that they alone have to carry the company, and they haven't paused to see if they're actually good at it or actually want it. Now, if you have a really self-aware COO or a number 2, they might say, I love running operations, but I don't actually want your job. That's a mic drop moment for the founder, because when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. The founder role carries a completely different energetic signature and different weight. It carries financial risk. It carries strategic pressure. It carries the responsibility of meeting payroll. It's the pressure of being the final decision maker, being the one that everyone criticizes for the decisions that aren't popular, even if they're better for the company. Running operations and running the company are 2 completely different skill sets and also 2 completely different types of people. You can be skilled, but your personality doesn't want to be in front. There are so many times where the cocktail's just wrong. And many exceptional operators simply do not want the founder's seat. This can lead me to another founder blind spot, which is if you have protected the throne for decades with your top talent around you, wanting eventually for them to take over, but not now, and having sort of a draconian energy of making them realize just how much it is that you're carrying so that they can do their job. And that helps you defend lower compensation models, helps you defend your value in the organization, however it manifests. You actually shoot yourself in the foot long term, because you'll literally spend years convincing them that they don't want this job because it's way too hard. And then when the moment of truth arrives, when you say, I think it's time for you to take over, you're completely shocked when they say, actually, I have no desire to have your job. No desire. That's a moment. That's a moment for the founder. Or you have a founder who beefs them up, who knows that they're their best chance at an exit strategy. There aren't competitive buyers. They don't want to try to go with a venture capital. They don't have a family member to take it over. And they've burned through enough number 2s over time that they isolate the last number 2 because they're nearing their retirement. And they beef them up and hype talk them and motivate them into believing themselves to be a number 1, though everybody, including their team and their clients, are very aware where they are simply a number two who's dressed up as a number one. And they get all excited and caught up into the whirlwind of how great this can be simply because the owner honestly knows that if that number two doesn't step in and take over, they have to close the business and they won't get paid out over the next 10 years of the company's profits, which is ultimately what they want, is that person to just steady the ship. And they forget that they are the face of the company. They are the charisma. They are have the star power. And that number two will never have it. So they've set everyone up to fail. But they did it because they wanted to collect for a few more years because of all the years they felt that they sacrificed. I love this kind of work because it's so multifaceted. There's so many murky details and motivations, and it's not because people are bad people necessarily. It's just because they haven't planned effectively. The next mistake I want to talk about is the valuation delusion. There's another mistake most founders make that almost nobody talks about, which is that they assume their business is worth more than it actually is. Not because they're arrogant, not because they're hopeful, just because they have poured 20 or 30 years of their life into building it. Emotionally, it just feels priceless. There's no way to put a price on what it's moved through, how much market share it's collected, how it creates a one-time only, no one else does it like us, so we can't possibly position ourselves with competitor analysis because we have created a blue ocean for ourselves. We're an anomaly. Everyone thinks they're an anomaly, by the way. And buyers don't evaluate businesses emotionally. They evaluate them strategically. It comes down to cash flow, a degree of objectified risk. You have to take the subjectivity of risk and you actually have to create real assumptions that you can defend with data. Customer concentration, leadership depth, systems, the level that technology and automation is integrated in your organization, and the onboarding and mentorship programs that you have in place. And here's the reality. Most founders have never had a professional valuation done, so they don't actually know what it's worth. It happens all the time. They have a hunch. Why? Well, hey, why should they doubt their hunch? It grew a business for them. They've been running off their gut instinct for a very long time. I'm a huge proponent of utilizing your body wisdom. But at times, when it comes to moving into what they think it's worth, they really don't know, and they certainly want it to be higher than maybe the market would say. The way to value a company, and obviously this is going to come way more in future episodes, isn't about what you feel is the right number. It's about what the market knows is the right number, what the market belief is. So often they're waiting for an offer that matches the number in their head and won't even blink at an offer that seems beneath them, even though that might be a very viable offer and could end up being an offer that they pass up and later regret not having taken seriously. The founder just keeps working, the exit never happens, and they slowly close their doors. And that's the quote legacy. So now I want to just briefly highlight some exit paths, because when we talk about having a succession plan, like as important as having an initial business plan to get your business going, having the exit plan is so important. What possible exit strategies could exist in that? So for companies under around 50 million a year in revenue, the paths to exit are actually pretty predictable. First is selling to a strategic buyer. It could be that you've identified a competitor and you just do things differently, or you've adopted a percentage of market share that they have been wanting for years and they can't beat you at your prices or at your quality of service. And so instead of trying to get themselves to be at your level and to take over and cannibalize your business, they actually would prefer to just buy you out. You know, sometimes they're maybe not in your industry, but they like what you do, but they want to be in your industry. And they deeply understand the operations of what you do, but they don't understand the clientele like you do. So they just want to go ahead and create that. It's a strategic buyer. They do not know your clients and they probably do not know your employees. They're an outsider, in other words. The second would be selling to private investors, the venture capital, and pitching and really looking for this kind of larger valuation of what's possible with the trajectory that your business has already proven it can trend towards, but still has unrealized potential. The third is transitioning ownership internally, very, very common in this size company, and or passing the company to families. This is where you get multi-generational ownership. And if you are listening to this and you have inherited the business or you took over the business from a family member and you are already eyeing the next generation and wondering who's coming next, your exit strategy is already in your mind of having the family carry on the legacy through the family. Or this is the unfortunate outcome that rarely gets talked about, but is an exit, which is the founder just retires and the business is closed, the assets are sold, and the IP goes away into an archive, into a box, not because it failed, not because it wasn't profitable, but because no successor was ever developed and no exit strategy ever panned out. And I think, honestly, that might be one of the ones we're the most afraid of as founders. Final thing I want to talk about in today's pilot episode is the identity collapse. Here's the part of the conversation that almost no one talks about. That's the identity. As a founder, you are someone who has built a company for decades. The business becomes deeply tied to who you are and can become such an extension of your identity. You're so enmeshed in it, you don't know who you are without it. Your daily routine, when you wake up, when you take vacations based on the seasonality of the business, your reputation in the community, the checks that you love writing every year to support causes that deeply matter to you, your relationships, your sense of relevance. So when founders exit, the identity that carried them for decades suddenly disappears. And for some founders, a lot of founders, that transition can be incredibly difficult. Research on retirement actually shows something fascinating. People who retire without purpose often experience quick declines in health, cognitive engagement, and even lifespan. This actually gets talked about quite a bit in masterminds with retiring founders as a cautionary tale. And this often can lead baby boomer founders, for example, who I've worked a lot with, into staying even longer because they're actually afraid of that instead of just solving for that. The real challenge isn't just in exiting the business. The real challenge is designing what comes next so it feels so exciting and vibrant. It feels like a second act you're looking forward to. You understand deeply what it'll be like, and you've surrounded and created a support system and an excitement around it that makes it something you're moving towards instead of just moving away from something. And that's a really important ideological difference. What a great exit actually looks like is really, really beautiful to talk about. To me, when I imagine the scenario that I think a lot of us as founders really want is imagining a founder starting to plan their transition 3 to 5 years before selling. They have built leadership in depth. They've developed their managers. They've tested their managers. They've made space for their managers. They've closed their mouth to let the manager speak instead. They've reduced founder dependency. They've built up their manager's ability to insource their resourcefulness, their wisdom, their direction. They understand the value of the business as a range, as a sliding scale, but they understand that it's a reflection of the real market value of what they've built, not the emotional extension of who they are. They have mentored someone internally to be like them, think like them, or hold the vision that they hold. And they have found the right strategic buyer so that when the exit finally happens, it doesn't feel chaotic, it feels intentional. The founder steps away with financial security, a nice nest egg to go into retirement. The team feels proud. They feel ready. They've been preparing. It's been transparent. It's been something that they've co-created with the founder. And the company continues growing. That email you send out to your stakeholders, your employees, your clients, they've been anticipating your retirement and they're thrilled for you. They're not alarmed. They're excited because they've been anticipating it and they've been prepared for that change. And the founder moves off into the next chapter of their life energized, mentoring, investing, advising, spending more time with family, traveling, learning something new, picking up a guitar. Instead of shrinking, their world expands. That is the founder's second act. And when founders architect that transition intentionally, it can be one of the most fulfilling chapters of their life. So if you are listening to this and realizing that you've never actually evaluated your company through an exit lens, I want you to know that you're not alone. This doesn't mean that you aren't intelligent. It doesn't mean that you aren't strategic. It means you've been busy and you're pausing at the right moment in time. because most founders are simply too busy running their businesses. That's exactly why I offer something I call a founder exit readiness call. It's a focused conversation where we hop on the phone and we look at three things. How dependent is the company on you? What realistic exit paths exist? And what structural changes could dramatically increase your options and valuation over the next few years? Because the founders who have the strongest exit, honestly, begin planning 2 to 3 years out from when they want to ideally exit. And the word ideally is important there because ideally could push them into 5 years, but they're prepared for those last final 2 years. If that speaks to you, if you want to evaluate where you are in the process so that you can have a really solid, well-architected plan that honors who you are as a founder and sets your team, your clients, and your company up for success, you can find the link to book that call in the show notes. If you remember one thing from today's pilot episode, I hope you remember this. The best exits don't happen when a buyer appears magically out of thin air. It doesn't happen when they have a health crisis. The best exits happen years earlier, when the founder begins building a company that can outlive them and start shifting the focus from a company that is experiencing steady growth to a company that is experiencing steady leadership. And that is the beginning of the founder's second act. If you are a founder thinking about your next chapter, don't wait until an offer appears to start planning. The strongest transitions are designed years in advance. And if you'd like clarity on where your business stands today, you can book a founder exit readiness call through the link that I'll provide in the show notes. If you know another founder navigating this transition or saying that they're interested in exiting, please share this episode with them. Until next time, keep building businesses that can outlive you and architect the most vibrant second act.